please join me out front to congratulate our winners. So if we could just kind of stand up, come up here, and we're going to actually congratulate our winners this month.
Yay. We're doing that again? Yeah. All right. That's been a while. Exciting, right? Absolutely. All right. This is exciting. It's like the old times again. I know. I'm trying to remember. Whatever you're comfortable with. Yep. Yep. All right, so tonight the Board of Education acknowledges our Pride winners for the month of March. Pride stands for proudly recognizing individuals demonstrating excellence. The Board of Education implemented this program in the fall of 2015 to recognize, promote, and celebrate the many contributions made by teachers and employees across the district. Our Teachers of the Month are sponsored by Allied First Bank, which recognizes what our teachers do day in and day out for the continued growth and success of our students. Awardees, as your name is called, please come forward to be congratulated by the board and Dr. Sparlin. Congratulations to the following teachers for having been recognized as March Teachers of the Month. Laura Steele, an industrial education teacher at Murphy Junior High School. Come on forward. Our next winner is Paisley Suarez, an English learner teacher at Oswego East High School.
by recognizing that the decisions they make today in the short term will help fulfill their long-term goals and strengthen their impact on society. So that was really cool. I also visited Lakewood and was able to speak with Ms. Budd and Mr. Luikas. And they explained a lot of the challenges, the unique challenges of today, as well as acknowledging the great work that their staff does. So it was very interesting, informative. For a new school board member, I need to catch up quick. So that was great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I do have an update or a congratulations for the robotics team. The SD308 2338 Geared Forward robotics team competed this past weekend, and they won and placed in an upcoming world competition. In addition, they finished 4th in the robotics games, and that's setting a 2022 season record. And they won the most prestigious award in all of the FIRST robotics, and that's the Chairman's Award. And this award is given to the team with the most exemplifies the principles of outreach, equity, and inclusion. And the teams who win this award are automatically awarded a spot to compete in the world competition in Houston, Texas. So that's awesome. And that's being held in April 20th through the 23rd. And our district's team includes students from Oswego East High School, Oswego High School, and 8th graders from Plank, Trauber, and Junior High School. So congratulations to the amazing team and the coaches for all they've done, and best of luck at the world competition.
I just wanted to share that today is a very special day. March 21st is World Down Syndrome Day. Every day, people with Down syndrome are breaking down barriers and defying stereotypes. Some of the most amazing humans that I have met and grown to love, who also happen to have Down syndrome, exhibit positivity, strength, fortitude, grace, and ability far beyond what I could ever imagine. I am hopeful for a day where we don't have to highlight those with intellectual disabilities, and we are instead celebrating everyone's abilities. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I wanted to offer congratulations to our community and to our Oswego Wildcats for their win at the Special Olympics State Basketball Competition. I heard the athletes played amazing and had a lot of fun. The Wildcats Silver Team received a silver medal. The Wildcats Junior Team received a bronze medal. And the skills athlete Andrew Sy received a silver medal. SD308 is so proud of all these students' hard work, commitment, and teamwork, and congratulations again.
Yeah.
And
We had a really cool send-off for the kids.
Yeah.
All the employees at the district office, along with all the employees from the Pathways program, lined the halls all the way up and down, and we just cheered for them. And the kids were so happy and so excited. It was just such a wonderful moment.
very good.
Yeah.
I love it.
That's awesome.
And a week or so ago, we had Read Across America Week, and I had the honor of reading to a special ed class, a 4th grade class, and a 1st grade class at Churchill. So I just wanted to say thank you to Churchill, and thank you to Sarah Caffarello for organizing it and inviting me to come in and read to students. It's always a pleasure to get to see them and to see them light up when you read to them. So thank you so much for that. Okay, anyone else with any comments? All right. So then we'll jump to 6.2, board committee reports, and we'll start with policy and legislation. Go ahead.
We met on March 14th, and we acted as the Parent-Teacher Advisory Council for Student Rights and Responsibilities for the 22-23 school year, the Students' Rights and Responsibilities document. There was a presentation on bus safety and discipline for Mr. D'Armand, a presentation of behavioral intervention and special updates by Dr. Hildebrand. Ms. Patterson summarized the administration administrative changes in the student handbook, and the committee added feedback. Ms. Patterson also provided an overview on our law enforcement reciprocal reporting agreements. Our policy updates with regard to policy 4:60, purchases and contracts. We did request that we change the dollar amount for purchases that need to go before the board for approval from $25,000 to $20,000, except in an emergency. Policy 4:65, the disposition of district property. We talked about having a practice where the board is also communicated to where the district is disposing of property, and we put that dollar amount around $20,000 as well. We reviewed 6:310, high school credit for non-district experiences, course substitutions, and reentering students. And we've asked the Teaching and Learning Committee to please add the word accredited, so that the programs that we give credit for have some sort of accreditation around them. Finally, second to last, 7:30 with student assignment and intra-district transfer residents. We just had a very robust discussion around boundary changes and appropriate demographics, socioeconomic inclusion in when we were making student assignment and intra-district transfer requests. And then finally, we discussed a new policy 8:65, recording of IEP proceedings. The committee just made some very minor changes. We took out the word tape recording because obviously tape recording is not how it's done anymore. And that was the whole meeting. It mostly centered around discussion of the updates to the student rights and responsibilities for next year.
Could we also, though, could we send out to the whole board the dress code? Because we did get hung up a little bit on the new dress code policy, but that kind of went around and around and around and around and around. So and I know I didn't.
I feel like that often does.
I think you'll find it interesting. But I totally forgot to ask you about that earlier, so if you could send that out, that would be amazing. Thank you, Ursula. I'm gonna guess you guys will go around the same rounds we went.
I'm happy to skip that if you care to share. We can just say, yeah, what they said.
Lori, I didn't hear you. What did you say?
Sorry about that. I said, I'm happy to skip having the same round and round that the policy committee had if she wants to just share what the policy committee went around and round about.
It was specifically in regards to student dress code. The policy the rights and responsibilities is being updated to reflect that students should wear a top, a bottom, and shoes. And we took out some references. Some references were suggested to be taken out, such as wearing a crop top or a shirt with spaghetti straps. And some of that was in regards to student survey and
The equity thing.
emails that we've received from
With gender.
students regarding who that really affects. And there was just discussion and difference of opinion about that.
That doesn't surprise me. Just, students, if we're talking about this, do you know, have you guys covered much about student dress code in your work yet this year?
No, not much.
Not yet.
It wasn't,
Part of the scope, yeah?
yeah, it wasn't
Okay.
an initial issue brought up that was,
Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah.
I'm
It
sure
wasn't
you
one of the top issues.
Right.
Issues.
Okay.
But just out of mild curiosity, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, like, if we did happen to ask students what they thought about it, I already know several students who have very strong opinions about it. Just like about, like you said, like
Right.
who it really affects, who it's directed at, who it helps, things like that. And there's so many, I guess, multifaceted aspects to it that, I mean, like, if we ever did try to gain some information about that, I think we'd get a lot of perspectives about it as well.
And we've had, Dr. Sparling, you had your superintendent
Parent Advisory Committee,
Well, this one was the students.
Student Advisory Committee, okay.
And we've had a couple of different student sessions around dress code and all of that. So there is documentation out there over the last 3 years regarding what they feel and how they feel about the dress code. So that could be pulled up.
Well, and that's what I'm wondering, did that information feed into the concept of top, bottom, and shoes?
That's our understanding, yeah.
There, I think was it Margaret that was on that committee? Somebody in our,
Margaret Darnell?
yeah, somebody in our meeting was
I wasn't there.
talking about it. I can't, for the life of me, right this second, because we got stuck on the top, bottom, and shoes.
Well, we'll talk about, we're not
Yeah.
talking about the student handbook
Right.
tonight, right?
Right.
No.
Okay, I would definitely be interested in more information on what feeds into the word choices, and to make sure that if we're going to make changes to word choices, that we are making positive changes rather than just different changes.
Well,
Yeah, well, and that's what I'll be interested to learn more about.
All right. Anything more, lady? Ladies, no. Wrong, sorry. Well, give me a word. Give me a word that I would say.
Good
Jadon,
people.
Dr. People. All right. All right, Teaching and Learning Committee.
All right, we met on March 2nd. Similar to the last board meeting, the committee was presented with the recommendations for new elementary social studies and junior high math. Discussion occurred. For the social studies, new curriculum shifts to inquiry and application, help students better transition to junior high and high school. Student voice was a big part of that curriculum. It allows students to make choices in their inquiry and in their projects. One of the things that the committee appreciated was that the rubrics are student-friendly and easily adapted to allow for student choice while holding students accountable. Then there was the junior high math discussion. Was first and foremost, we are picking math materials that align with the SD308 math framework. Currently, we purchase annual consumables, and many teachers are creating their own materials. The teacher committee agrees that we need to change so students can achieve. The curriculum has 24/7 professional development tools, which with each lesson modeled in a classroom video to show it in practice. Training on how to utilize new teaching techniques will be integral, and it integrates, well, a couple other things. It integrates with Google Classroom, and students do not need to have internet to have it on their Chromebook. So those are some of the things that were discussed and were considered positive about the new curriculum that was presented.
And that we haven't had new social studies curriculum
What was
since
it 21 years?
2000.
17 years, okay, sorry.
But that's not to say that every year they don't add their own. Hopefully.
Fully.
And now we'll go on to 6.3, Superintendent's Report.
Well, good evening, Board. The past 2 years have been long and challenging ones on many different levels. But with that said, we've come through it, and I believe we can be better and stronger for it. Now is the time to reconnect, re-challenge ourselves, and with a renewed focus on safe, inclusive schools, climate and culture, academic achievement, finance, and student voice as we work towards educating all students to reach their highest potential. Tonight, the board is going to hear an update on our progress to Envision 308, which you all know is our strategic plan. One aspect of that plan is to have a balanced budget that works towards creating a 20% fund reserve so that we can end the long-standing practice of issuing annual tax anticipation warrants, to end issuing debt service extension bonds for capital projects, to begin allocating dollars to capital projects on an annual basis, having an annual budget that includes a contingency, and having a budget that includes the appropriate amount of dollars within each year's budget to continually update the curriculum and to provide the materials and resources that our students and our teachers need as their learning tools. So as I've shared in the past, this part's a little bit of a recap, but in 2016, when I became superintendent, we showed a do-nothing scenario, which meant we keep spending the way we were, and if we did nothing, spending at the same rate, then in 2020, we not only would not have a fund balance, we would have been $15 million in the red. So from 2016 through 2020, the Board of Education had to make a series of annual cuts that required difficult conversations and even more difficult decisions. These were very hard conversations to have, but they were needed conversations to get us to the point that we are currently at now. And where we're at now is having a projected fund balance of $25 million at the end of 2022. So to some, that may sound like a healthy reserve, but not necessarily. To reach our goal of having a 20% fund balance, we need to have approximately $51 million in our reserves. The good news is we're just about halfway there to meeting that goal, and that we are projected a balanced budget moving forward that includes all the things that I just mentioned earlier. And during this time, we will also be adding to our reserves to eventually meet that 20% goal. So are we financially secure? The answer is not yet. Have we put our district on a path that will get us to be financially secure? The answer is yes. The evidence-based funding formula that was adopted by the state 5 years ago, along with what we have done as a district, has created a much brighter financial future for District 308. So as long as the evidence-based funding formula and the state continues to fund that, which was created to help level the academic and financial field for school districts like 308, with the 5-year projections that Dr. Petsky has put together, this will allow us to eventually reach our financial goals. I'm very pleased to be able to share what I just did, and I'm even more pleased to have Dr. Petsky present those 5-year projections in the very near future to the Board of Education. So that's my report for this evening.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you.
6.4, student ambassador reports.
Thank you. Colton and I have a lot to cover today regarding the specifics of the second student survey that we administered. Since our last board meeting, the Student Advisory Committee, along with Dr. Waller, Dr. Sparlin, Mr. Gatewood, Mr. Grays, and Mrs. Benkowski met to discuss and divulge into the data received by the students from our second student survey. There were a couple of key statistics and I guess conclusions that we made that we received from our students that we wanted to talk about today. First of all, 94% of those who took the survey believed they could identify sexual harassment, and on the contrary, only 77% of survey responders believed that their peers could identify sexual harassment. We discussed that this could lead to student-to-student interactions and relationships and perceptions that create an unsafe feeling in learning environments. Another important conclusion we derived from the survey was that the majority of students could identify very intentional acts of sexual harassment, but only around half of the students could consistently identify more hidden forms of sexual harassment, such as repeating messages after someone has received a negative response, or repeatedly asking for a phone number after receiving a negative response, and more. We discussed that this may be related to how forms of sexual harassment students learned growing up were very explicit and obvious, while subtle forms of sexual harassment weren't discussed as frequently. 73% of individuals said that enough information on sexual harassment was not available to them, and we were able to have discussions on programs such as Mutual Grounds that relate to this statistic. Oftentimes, external sources are used to teach high school students about sexual harassment and sexual assault, but how to report sexual harassment in the student's school and who to report it to isn't very prominent, which causes the gap in trust from students to their schools to become even more prominent, even more present. The majority of students had never reported sexual harassment. Only 67% of students felt safe reporting sexual harassment, and 665 individuals said they did not know how to report sexual harassment. 52% of students said they did not think the school addresses sexual harassment properly, and most people have not experienced sexual assault or harassment, though many indicated that they had mostly observed it on social media, in the hallways, and some had also commented that they'd seen it in the locker rooms as well. Finally, the majority of people were able to identify that sexual harassment impacted survivors through anxiety, depression, hard time communicating their feelings, and low self-esteem, as well as anxiety from social media. But students were less likely to identify that sexual harassment impacted people through eating disorders, substance abuse, and relationships or friendships, which are also causes, or actually I should say effects of sexual harassment.
Yeah, and so I'll turn some of those percentages into numbers in mind. So we recognize that over 1,500 students felt that there is a lack of education on sexual harassment in our schools, and and that a sizable amount of students, over 350, did not feel safe reporting instances to staff members, and over 660 students didn't even know how. Now, in our initial discussion, we brought up the fact that amongst the student body, there is a sentiment that nothing is done or things just get worse for the victim. We see and hear that every day, and over 1,000 students answered that way on the survey. Several committee members did bring up the point that the sentiment is caused by students not being aware of policies of the district. When it comes to addressing this behavior, we understand the obvious and necessary need for confidentiality on a case basis, but also could not ignore the fact that this lack of awareness is potentially causing survivors or witnesses to not report instances of sexual harassment because of fear of nothing will happen. I would also like to add that in questioning when or where sexual harassment was being witnessed, the major places were in areas either not under school adult supervision, such as social media, or were in places either not where many students navigate through, like hallways where their staff members really don't have the ability to constantly monitor everything and everyone. We also were able to share that many believe that the students must perceive the structure of protection from sexual harassment in our schools to feel safe, and that should be felt that the survivor is the #1 priority in any situation and has no instance of blaming. Through research using YPAR, the Student Advisory Committee cited from a study that students were more likely to face a larger amount of trauma from one instance of sexual harassment than multiple instances of bullying. Moving forward, transparency is key to addressing student concerns present in the results from the survey. It not only motivates action by students to report any acts of sexual harassment to a trusted adult, knowing that it's going to be taken seriously, but it also creates a safe learning environment where students can focus on education rather than being exposed to sexual harassment in any manner. It has no place in our schools, and we hope through the dedication from administration, our committee, and Dr. Waller to address this, students understand we feel the same way and working towards change.
Awesome.
Phenomenal work.
Yeah, very, Colton and Anya, very, very well said. You know, we have our data, our student data now. We have the research that was done by the students, by the committee. We have some recommendations. We're now bringing more adults into the conversation as we put together a comprehensive plan for the 22-23 school year in regards to sexual harassment. We're looking at the scope and sequence of the curriculum, when it's taught, how it's taught, where the gaps are. And then once we have that full plan, with Dr. Waller and Dr. Pajasic are putting some good amount of time in right now, we're going to bring it back to the student committee to share with them what our plan is moving forward, so we can get their feedback on the final plan. So it's been a great committee, a lot of hardworking people, and the students have been absolutely incredible to work with.
Incredible, and I just want to echo that we should be very, very proud of not only Colton and Anya, but the committee. They're super engaged, super intelligent. I wish you guys could be in the room. Dr. Sparlin and I just looked at each other, because we don't even have to say much, that the way that they aggregate the data, the way that they draw conclusions based on what they have, it's just a phenomenal committee to be a part of. You guys are doing a phenomenal job, so we thank you for that.
Thank you. Incredibly courageous, too, to be the voice of so many students and understand that you are now speaking for people that didn't feel like they had a voice before. So
Yes.
Thank you to the both
Thank
of you
you.
and to the committee and to the administrators that are supporting you.
Great job.
All right, item 7.1 is a comprehensive update on our District 308 strategic plan, Envision 308. Tonight, we have many people here to share our success in accomplishing everything that's been outlined for the 21-22 school year. As we all know, there are 4 quadrants to Envision 308: student learning, support for student learning, finance and facilities, and community partnerships. Faith Dahlquist, Associate Superintendent, is going to start us off. Faith?
Thanks so much. As Dr. Sparlin said, there are 4 quadrants in areas of Envision 308, but we've recently provided updates for the finance and facilities portions and also community partnerships. So rather than rehash all of that, which we had just done, we'll just be focusing tonight on student learning and support for student learning. All of the slides there are part of the process, though, so that when they are posted for our community, they can see all of the progress at once. I do have cast of thousands today, so there will be people rotating through. So I'd ask as you talk for the first time, if you'd introduce yourself, and we're going to start off with student learning with Shannon and Lindsay.
Good evening. My name is Lindsay Allen. I'm the Director of Elementary Education. In regards to student learning, you can see that throughout this school year, we have completed our first rounds of classroom walkthroughs, focusing in on the literacy and math frameworks and looking at best instructional practices in the classroom. We are almost done with our second round, so we're very excited about that. We've seen a lot of great things happening in our buildings. You can also see that we've held many trainings, not only for our building administrators, but our instructional coaches and all of our staff members, multiple dates in regards to the literacy and math frameworks. We'll continue that through the rest of this year and also into next year. And then finally, there was a staff survey that was put out in February, and we're very excited to be able to look at that data and find out what our staff believes their professional development needs are going forward.
Shannon Luters, Director of Junior High Education. As Lindsay said, we have held numerous trainings for our building level administrators in both the literacy and math frameworks, and we will continue that through next year as well. We do have the 2 secondary instructional coaches, and since late September, they have every Monday morning sent weekly tips about the literacy and math frameworks, respectively, out to the entire departments for math and ELA. And those have been very well received by our teachers. And then, as you know, we have piloted a new math resource, and we'll be bringing that back to you in early April.
Good evening. I'm Heidi Pajasek. I'm the Director of Social Emotional Learning. We have done quite a few things since I met with you and spoke with you in January about our SEL framework. But we have fully implemented our updated curriculum resources in grades kindergarten through 8th grade, and in fact recently completed some training on the Institute Day for our early childhood teachers on social emotional learning standards and the second step in Enter Explorer curriculums. We have common behavioral expectations that are in their final stages of being created for all of our schools. We continue to implement lessons at the high school level and continue to learn more about Tier 1 SEL instruction and Tier 1 SEL instructional needs of our high school students. We are continuing to review our discipline data and train various administrative groups on use of that data. And not only have our district restorative practices leadership team members been identified, but we have participated in a full 2-day training with the International Institute of Restorative Practice on restorative practices for educators, and we'll begin our work in earnest internally in April.
We've also been working on expanding our opportunities for students to have choice and challenge, differentiation and personalization to their interests and their needs. Some of the highlights there is the literacy framework, where we are having our students have daily choice and time in what they are reading and practicing their literacy skills. Also, it's part of our math framework that we have differentiation in small group time at K-8 level. And then most recently, we've surveyed our high school students on their level of satisfaction with the amount of challenge and choice that they're getting, and we'll be incorporating some of that feedback in our future planning as well.
So the work aligned to Envision 308 at the high school has been focused on creativity, real-world problems, and career paths. As we've talked before, we will be introducing new graduation requirements for the incoming class of 2023, built around flexibility, especially in the area of electives. The new courses that we will be implementing in the 2023 school year really either fill out a 4-year sequence based on a career area of study or some creative outlets. The 4 courses that we will be implementing is the Project Lead the Way Cybersecurity, Calculus 3, Theater Directing 2, and Advanced Dance. And then the work that we've done on college and career pathway endorsements focus on professional learning, career-focused instructional sequencing, and academic readiness. So this year, we were able to complete the academic readiness. We have transitional English and math, dual credit English and math, and AP English and math also.
Thank you. We're also working on preparing our students for post-secondary life for financial and digital literacy. If you recall the social studies presentation for elementary, that financial literacy is a piece of that. And then our junior highs have been working with that, and the high school social studies committee is also looking at how do we incorporate the financial literacy standards for when we adopt new courses and materials there. At 6 through 8, we have been working on that digital literacy piece and what that looks like. And as we develop all other courses, we look at the digital literacy piece of all of our content areas. We believe that it is best incorporated in there as not only just a standalone class. The next piece is talking about our K-8 assessments. And our goal this year was to have a new program that gave us actionable data that actually used less time than our previous system. And I'm happy to say that that has happened. And along with this, we've started a district instructional team to model the use of data district-wide by disaggregating it into different groups, looking at how it falls with different demographics, and seeing how that then can be shared out with our schools. So we're really happy also that our new system has a way of giving us a reading level for our students in grades 2 through 8, and that is a key part of our literacy framework.
Good evening. I am Jadon Waller. I am the Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Family Engagement. And so earlier this school year, the equity statements were finalized and put into this amazing formal format, in which since then we have worked together with administrators, and I provided professional development for principals and assistant principals. And then they then took it a step further, and then they began to have conversations around the equity statements with different scenarios attached to it. The work that we've been focusing on is our ability to recognize inequities and then respond effectively, most importantly by validating, but then being able to open the floor for conversation and dialogue with our community. And so in addition to that, we have worked with the student ambassadors who have already shined tonight, but that work with the student ambassadors has truly been an empowering journey for all of us and them, and their ability to just articulate and truly understand the needs of all of our students has been life-changing. So I'm super excited to see the work that we are able to continue to do with them. In addition to that, I was able to reestablish the DEI committee that was previously in position. And so throughout that DEI committee, we have developed subcommittees from there where there's a focus group on communities and family engagement. There's a focus group that is working with our students, in which we have created a student DEI committee with high schoolers for now, and I am slowly creeping into junior high. But that group has worked very, very hard to put together our event that's coming up on April 7th at Oswego High School, 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. It is called Amplify. And so having reestablished that DEI committee and been able to have important conversations about our work within the community and our work within the district and where we want to go has truly been a nice step forward. And when we have our next meeting, actually the student DEI committee will join our adult DEI committee, so they can actually have a collaboration and learn from each other. And so furthermore with that, I actually was thinking that I am just going crazy, but I, since January 10th, have done over 35 professional development with various groups throughout the district, whether it be with students. I was able to teach 5th grade at both Grand Park and Southbury. That was exciting. I am a high school English teacher formerly. In addition, I've had just an awesome time having professional developments with principals, assistant principals, our special education department, deans, social workers. So it's been quite the exciting journey to truly come together and understand that equity means love. And so finally, I know that the policy committee has spoken on this, but we have been working closely to address the dress code policy in an effort to make it more inclusive and culturally relevant for all of our students. Thank you. Oh, it's me again. I'm so sorry. So in addition to this, and I know Ken will take the reins after myself, so the DEI Student Committee actually took this amazing picture where they had these big glasses, oversized, because we were learning about perspectives. And so we utilized that picture of this diverse group of students and created a flyer in which we took down to Illinois State, and they went to North Central to really have this vision of who we are overall, and that we are culturally diverse and culturally responsive, and that's who we are looking for. And so I've been able to work closely with Nancy Mendez, who is our recruitment specialist, and so we've been looking at postings and what we are including, and with the recruitment team committee that we have been looking at the questions that we're asking so that we can make sure that who we bring to the table is someone who is open and ready to address and engage in a culturally responsive environment.
Ken Miller, Executive Director of HR, and this work that Dr. Waller is mentioning is absolutely critical, because if our goal is to have our teachers and administrators mirror the demographics of those bachelor's and master's degrees that are issued each year by Illinois institutions of higher education, we've got a little bit of work we still need to get done. And to get there, we're really focusing, like Dr. Waller said, on a two-way approach of both raising our visibility through community outreach events like job fairs and the open interview process that's been very successful, and also working through committees to be able to eliminate some of the barriers that might be standing in the way of support staff achieving their goals to become teachers, or that might be causing promising candidates to be able to look elsewhere as well that are already within our ranks.
All right. So we are currently at the end of implementing signs of suicide as a program consistently across all of our junior high schools. We have started to receive data from Alyssa's Mission, who is our provider for that program, indicating the number of students, and I'm excited that we have a number of students that we have been able to connect to brand new resources within the community and get them services and supports that they were not receiving prior to the program. We have continued to establish and nurture relationships with a variety of local organizations for student options, and that list has been linked for you in a prior presentation. But we have a variety of different business partnerships for our students who are in the Pathways program and working. We have a lot of community partnerships for social services and support for our families, and then are also building our network of higher education partnerships in order to provide a variety of different resources. One of our most beneficial higher education partnerships is with the School of Social Work at Aurora University, not only for interns, but also for opportunities for our students. So we currently have a student leadership group that's been established, is being run by a school community resource collaborative intern who is introducing the students not only to their own skills and advocacy in order to support mental health within the community, but also introduce them to the career of future pathway of social work. We have completed the Illinois Youth Survey with our 8th graders, and that data, once that window closes after May, we will receive that data as a district and be able to begin disaggregating that and looking for trends and information about the behaviors and things that our students are reporting that they are engaged in school and outside of school, the supports that they have in school and outside of school, and then most importantly, reach out to some of our community partners for different funding and programs that come with participation in that survey. And I can let Val speak.
Thank you. Valerie Patterson, Executive Director of Student Services. So the area that I have invested here is the ALICE, which the acronym is Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evaluate. The instructors that we have are administrators at each building who are trained in that response. The training has undergone a lot of shifts, and we're now working with Navigate 360, which is the vendor that replaces ALICE Institute. So we've got, this year, we were developing materials for post-crisis, post-evacuation procedures. That was a really DAC team effort. I'm really proud of that work, and there's a lot about that that's going to be very supportive for our administrative teams. We do need to be sure that our ALICE instructors are properly certified, so that process has changed, and prior to the end of this school year, The ALICE instructors that are still remaining in the district will be preemptively recertified by our department, working together with Navigate 360. And we will also be planning for the training that would be available to make sure that we have the proper number of certified administration to support our staff and students across the district moving forward.
Thank you. I'm going to talk a little bit about professional development, and while I do that, if Denise and Renee could come up. So one of our goals this year was to come up with a 3-year professional development plan, which I will be sharing with the board in April. What we did so far this year is we wanted to come up with what are our expectations for the type of quality of staff development that we provide. And it's very important to us that we model the type of instruction that we want our students to receive, including differentiation, including inquiry, including having learning targets. So we set those up. They're a part of our climate for learning. They're called expectations for engagement. And there's the expectation that as district administrators, when we provide trainings to staff or principals, we model those when principals provide training to their staff, and so on. And then the links that are in there, what we attempt to do within Ed Services is map out the entire year. When we look at faculty meeting times, school improvement times, institute days, if we do not do that, any one of the people that has spoken in front of you today could passionately build enough trainings for the entire year. So we have to be very careful that we coordinate our time and our efforts so that there's a connected vision of how all of those pull together, and that we're not overloading our staff or planning so much that there isn't possibly time to do it all. And speaking of not having time, we did look through all of our pieces of Envision 308 well in advance, and there are some things that we are not doing this year and made that decision early on, and this piece of vision of the future of instruction is one of those pieces, and we look forward to looking at that next year. Special education. Oh,
It's
sorry.
me. It's me again. So in looking at this piece, in thinking about direct instruction, the student DEI committee, who has truly come together from both of the different schools, I made sure to pull information from last year so that all students would have an opportunity to apply. So they went through a process. And I want to just make sure that I acknowledge all the teachers from the DEI committee who are supporting these students groups. Diana Palumbo and Jamie Piper have truly done a ton, as well as Miriam Osich and Michael Leali. And so the group has decided that they want to be called the Coalition. They believe that they are a group of people from various backgrounds and different experiences who are coming together for the purpose to amplify their voices. And so in working with the group this past week, they have been working to create visual representation within each of their schools as a way to bring positivity and awareness to some contributions that various people from non-dominant backgrounds have contributed to this community as well as to the United States. So they got really into it. They got into these flags. That was a whole nother conversation. But they truly have been on this journey of just learning about who they are and determining how they can utilize their voice so that they can be bigger allies and for each other and for themselves. And so we've spoken on the Student Ambassador Committee, so I just want to make sure that I'm not over talking, but the action plan process is what we're working on now. Dr. Podasek and I are getting together and looking at some of the SEL standards with ISB, looking at the different structures that we put in place to make sure that we create an action plan that can be effective and impact our students. We've so much information, wealth of information that the student ambassadors and the information for the survey has provided us. And so we want to make sure that when we are doing this action plan that we're realistic, but that we are effective and that we meet the needs of all of our students. And so finally, we just recently administered another high school survey. I'm so happy the students keep taking them. But this one was focused specifically on culture responsiveness, student identity, student religion, as well as looking at SEL factors as well. And so we are in the process of looking at that information now, Ms. Dahlquist and Dr. Podjacek and myself, to determine how we'll utilize that information moving forward.
Thank you. Now it's special education.
Good evening, I'm Denise Hildebrand, the Executive Director of Special Education. This is really a follow-up to the report that I provided in October for you. The Special Education Department continues to engage in professional development activities that build capacity both in our staff and in our special education leadership. We've been focusing on the instruction of executive functioning skills at all levels, early childhood through to 12th grade. And also in providing training to both our administrators and our case managers, our teachers, on local education agency, or LEA, representative skill proficiency. We have developed a 4-module series that we've been able to train all of our staff in at this time. Really feel that we have seen positive results in the quality of special education, individualized education programs, and plans that we're seeing thus far. Processes for programming within specific special education programs located at Eastview Academy and at the Pathways Transition Program are being developed and piloted in anticipation of expanded implementation next year.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Renee Sartor, the Director of English Learners. And in addition to work on the dual
For him to talk through this slide. All right, so this is just look at where we're at, and we feel overall with all the different pieces that you've heard this evening that we are solidly making progress. We have quite a bit of work yet to do, but we have made progress so far. And then I will turn it to questions that the board may have.
I appreciate the fact that Dr. Waller says that our students are continuing to take the surveys, and we know that students have been saying to us for a long time that they don't want someone surveying them and then not seeing any result from what they say. And so I think it bodes well that if they're continuing to take the surveys, that they have confidence in the fact that not only are their voices being heard, but action is being taken. So that's really good.
I had a follow-up question to that. How are we doing the surveys?
How are we?
Right. I mean,
digitally?
are they doing them in study halls? Or
Part of the student support time. We usually take a few minutes from that time to administer the surveys.
Then I had a question on slide 3. So you talked briefly about the instructional coaching. I think it was Ms. Luters, right? So it's been a while. I don't remember the month, but I remember we were on stage for it, where we talked about the AVID program and how we have some AVID coaches who could be helping out with some of this stuff at the junior high, especially with literacy. Has that happened?
So the AVID coaches from that work at the district level?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, they've been part of not only the literacy training, but also the equity trainings as we've done those pieces. And they've been sitting in, most recently, I trained some of them for the math framework on Friday, and they're part of developing that professional development and then pushing that to other buildings. Come on in.
They've also participated in building level administrator training throughout the year on AVID structures, collaborative structures. They work very closely with the 2 secondary instructional coaches.
Or I just, like, I don't want them only working on Avid when we have all this other stuff going on.
Absolutely, and Avid is more of some of the instructional practices and the system work that fold into
Right,
what we're doing with
which is
literacy
why
and
I had asked for it earlier, but was just making sure.
And our AVID coordinator that supports elementary is also an elementary instructional coach at Eastview Academy, so she is prevalent in all of our instructional coach meetings that meet monthly.
Okay. I just, like, I don't want them just, like, I want them out in classrooms
Yes.
with teachers and.
Yes,
Okay.
we agree.
And I know that this was a time of like discovery through your walkthroughs, and now I think you're in the second phase of the walkthrough. So I'm just interested in all of this engagement. Like, what are some of your greatest takeaways or surprises or things that you discovered as you were going through the process?
So one of the pieces that I hadn't anticipated on when we looked at the literacy framework and that independent reading time, and independent reading time is simply having students have choice to practice their skills. And when I've done this in previous districts, that's a really key component, but this year at the elementary and junior highs, it was this calming time that students could really have almost some break and some pieces that you could just kind of feel the room breathe. So it was this great instructional piece, but it also was some of those connection pieces. Learning targets, we saw an improvement in the amount of classrooms that were displaying learning targets at junior high and high school. We still have some fine tuning to do in the quality of some of the learning targets and how we share that, but that was some of the progress. And then it was very great to see, even though I know we hear about there are a lot of behavioral issues and things that as our students are coming back, that there were marked differences for how our students were collaborating and working on academics, even from the first couple of weeks of the walkthroughs in October to the end of that time, and then seeing some of that as we go through. One of the side pieces that our staff gets to see that even teachers and principals may not is we bring along principals and assistant principals and people from DAC to go to other schools and go with us. And the amount of conversation that they're now having around common expectations is very different now than what they had in October. And there's this, oh, this is how we do this, and we can provide feedback. And kudos to our staff. I was very, very cautious at the beginning. Said, nobody can take notes. Nobody can do any of those things because this is not an evaluation of any of the teachers. This is an evaluation of how we are doing. And to my pleasant surprise, people were like, why aren't they taking notes? Why can't we talk about things? Why can't we? So about 3 or 4 classroom walkthroughs in, we changed that. And now we do take notes, not by specific teacher or by looking at that, but then we come back and we're able to share all the positive things and have that spread. Many times our principals will say, oh, I got to go back and talk about this at my school, or I need to take this practice back. So it's allowing some of that transference of some of the really good practices to happen elsewhere. That it's by design, that's what we wanted to have happen, but it's really great that we've got instruction and it's contagious and we're making progress now that we have some common language and frameworks. Because our teachers were always working really, really hard and doing great work, but to having some alignment to all of those pieces just helps everybody work together.
That's awesome.
Sorry, you can get me going. I could be here for an hour
that was
talking
awesome.
about
That's
stuff.
exactly what I wanted. That's awesome. That's great. Great to hear.
Any other questions?
Oh, I did. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
One other question. Recruiting. I heard that we are doing the open interview process and we're looking for more diverse candidates. But what are we doing to go where the pool of candidates are? For example, going to historically black colleges, universities, or et cetera, as opposed to waiting for them to come to us?
And that's an excellent question, and one that we are looking at for the upcoming year as we start to plan our recruitment activities for the upcoming year and the years to follow from there. Right now, I know one of the ones that we're really excited about looking at is a job fair that's going to be coming up with the University of Illinois at Chicago. When we take a look at the demographics of who is earning education degrees there, it is a very diverse population that we're looking at. We've also attended job fairs at Illinois State University, as Dr. Waller had said, and we are going to be attending a bilingual specific one that's hosted by IIRC coming up here, I believe, actually on Saturday. So we've got a lot of moving pieces where we're going out and we're actively trying to source within the community. We're obviously looking to be able to broaden our horizons when it comes to that, and we're looking forward to being able to put those pieces in motion in the years to come.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question about just, it was a bullet point, and I just wondered if you could put a little bit more content around it. The District Restorative Practices Leadership Team. You said that there's going to be a 2-day training, but what is the intent and purpose like moving forward? Because obviously 2 days of training doesn't quite.
Sure. So with the restorative practices, which is a lot about not only proactive measures, but how do we fold students back in after there's been an infraction, and how do we teach about that? And we've had some starts to that in various schools, but we have had some work to do in having a common shared definition of what that is. So Dr. Pajacek has brought in a common training, and then to have a district level team to implement that, and then looking at it for all junior highs and our high schools. We decided that we needed to really set a good, solid infrastructure of understanding on that, and have some common pieces before we continue to launch. And it's not that we don't have people at each of our schools that have good intentions and have been working hard at that, but without a common groundwork or framework, there's some possibilities for some missteps. So a lot of background work so that we hopefully can have a really strong foundation, and then travel faster once that has been established. I don't know if there was anything else
I think
that you wanted
with a
to add.
district our size, it takes a lot to bring down to the classroom level.
Correct.
And that's the goal of the restorative practices training that we went on, was we're starting with a small leadership team to really establish that foundation, and then a subset of that team will be trained as internal trainers, and then we'll be able to identify what our steps are. It'll be a multi-year process to really implement,
Oh,
because
yeah.
like you said, one of the reasons we chose the group that we did is because they look at it not only from the restorative justice end, after things have happened and in the discipline office, but all of those things that happen in the classroom prior to prevent us getting to that point to begin with. So it's about relationships, it's about instructional strategies and structures that we use in the classroom, and that involves a lot of people and a lot of training. So this will be something that takes multiple years, but we felt like that team needed to have that common understanding and language, so then we can determine what our district definition is. So when we start to roll it out, there's a really clear understanding of this is what it means, because there's a lot of different theories and beliefs and philosophies out there. This is what it means, and this is how we're going to get there over the next several years.
And I think the end goal is always the same, that we're trying to make sure that we aren't incurring those adverse childhood experiences through behavioral issues and expulsions and suspensions and all of that kind of stuff. So I look forward to hearing more about that, and maybe even somewhere down the road seeing that multi-year plan would be very helpful. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, I think hopefully I'm not repeating what she just said, but I'm hearing a common theme, I used the word common, of common expectations across the building. I think I've heard it now from most people, and I think that that's a phenomenal goal. I also think that it's an intentional strategy on top of everything that we're doing. And so I don't know the answer to that, but I know that, well, everyone is talking about the common strategies that we're pushing across all of the schools, and it's based on the frameworks and everything that we're doing. But on top of just implementing this, it's a level of intentionality, because it's a cultural shift, a level of intentionality to have common expectations and to make sure that they're implemented. So I don't really have a question, more so than are we at the same time being intentional about spreading that commonality across the board?
So my why of why I went into education and why I stay with this is to find the right balance between having common expectations so that we have systems that we can build, which also still have freedom and autonomy to let our students and our teachers' skills and talents shine through. So you'll hear us talk a lot about here's what we're tight on or here's what our expectations are, but built into that is that autonomy. So, and you'll see when we talk at the professional development training where I share the plan with you, to do complex change, there's 7 things that I always look through on what that is, and one of those is having common expectations and a shared vision of where we're going, because that helps everyone pull together. Our instructional coaches, it's our belief that as long as we can get our instructional coaches, here's where we're all going, they're just helping coach and support people to get there, not coming in with their own opinions about this is what we should do. And then it becomes a lot easier to train new staff because this is established of what we're doing and folding them in. Because real professional development and systems change isn't done a year at a time. It's many, many years of consistent language.
Thank you.
You got me going again.
All right, are we ready to move on to 8.0 consent agenda? Are there any questions on the consent agenda?
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, if there are no questions on the consent agenda, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
I make a motion to approve all items under consent, including 8.1, minutes from the Board of Education meeting on February 28th, 2022, open and closed session, and 8.2 to acknowledge the FOIA requests received by the district.
Second.
Mrs. Simulton?
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood?
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson?
Aye.
Mr. Sarong?
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle?
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson?
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0.
Item 9.1 is information on financial statements. Are there any questions on what has been provided this evening? Item 9.2 is in regards to our district safety plan. As we continue to see a decline of cases of COVID-19 in our schools and across the community, we are looking to make some changes to our exclusionary procedures, and we wanted to bring those changes to your attention. Teresa?
Good evening. Outlined in the memo there, I'm just going to highlight some of the changes that we are proposing these go into effect on Wednesday. Really, this is just addressing the chronic absences related to seasonal and chronic conditions in students such as allergies and migraines. At this point, that makes up the largest number of our students that are excluded from school for 5 days or require a test for return. We want to acknowledge that and work with families and their healthcare providers to obtain medical documentation of those conditions that they may have, what the expected symptoms would look like if somebody were to have that type of condition, and allow for our nurses to have that clinical judgment when they're evaluating a student in the school nurse's office so that they can determine whether or not that really isn't in line with what we would expect, and again, not excluding that student if we don't believe that's necessary for the safety of that student and those around them. Additionally, we would like to expand our testing as we see the number of cases continue to decrease. We believe we have the capacity at this point to allow for testing within our nurse's office. So we have worked with our local health departments and obtained cases of rapid tests for each of our buildings across the district. And at this time, if a student, excuse me, not this time, but moving forward, Wednesday and beyond, if a student develops symptoms while they are at school and there's not a pre-existing condition or medical documentation that would indicate the reason for the symptoms, as the nurse is evaluating that student and determining if there's potential suspect of COVID-19, rather than automatically excluding them as we have been doing up to this point, really based on the capacity within the nurse's office, we will be offering the option to parents to then authorize the test to happen right there in the nurse's office and avoid exclusion altogether. So that process will be that the nurse will reach out directly to the parent at that moment in time. parents would provide the authorization that there'd be a rapid test there in the office. 15 minutes later, that student's cleared and returns to class. So it's just another piece of that puzzle as we talk about evaluation of students and who's, you know, safe to be in the building and who needs to be excluded. So we really feel comfortable in making these changes. And again, all of this is really built around that really important goal of keeping kids in school and keeping in-person learning for all of our students. So happy to address any questions in regards to this recommended change.
I'm just very grateful as a parent of an allergy sufferer. And our goal to not just keep kids in person, but the continuity of letting them stay is so important. Even a day away is like causes such an issue. So parents, the provider has to send in the letter.
Yeah, and for a number of our students, we already have this type of documentation, but up to this point previously, based on the state recommendations at the height of the pandemic, we were not accepting that documentation as a reason to avoid exclusion. So for a number of our students, we already have that documentation in place in our nurse's office that's collected as part of their annual health survey when they start the school year. But if you do not have that information on file and you wish to work with your school nurse, we invite all parents, and we'll include that in the information that goes out to parents tomorrow, invite them to provide that information to their school nurse. So it's just another resource that the nurse can access when they're making that medical evaluation. I do think it's important to point out as well, if a student does call in, if a parent calls a student in sick, like they're not there at all on a day, when they want to come back, if they were out for an illness that does include symptoms of COVID-19, we do still need that student to test prior to coming back in our building. That really helps to secure the safety of the students and staff in the building, not bringing someone in who was actively sick and home for a period of time. We don't want to become that testing source. We still maintain our testing at the old Trevor location that is still open 3 days a week moving forward. So we would still encourage parents to utilize outside testing if their student has not been in attendance in school. This school-based testing will really be just a quick answer for students who are already in the building.
Yeah, thank you for the update, because this is just another venue or platform for our community to see and understand some of the changes that we're making, as opposed to them just having it sent in an email, which they may not open.
Sure.
Or so I appreciate that very much.
Yeah.
And so as it relates to the safety plan, are there any things that you see coming next as an update for us?
You know, we're kind of in a tough spot right now where we received pretty frequent updates from the state public health department and our local health department on a pretty regular basis. For a while there, we had lots of written resources. That's a challenge at this point, as things have really changed for many other settings across the state in regards to COVID. The written guidance to schools is kind of lacking at this point, and we've had a few phone calls with the state, but they have not been able to narrow down when we could expect updates to the written guidance. And schools, as a result of that, I think are kind of all in different places with what they maybe moved forward with and what they haven't. So we remain in really close contact with our local health department very frequently, and talking with them about what we're comfortable moving forward with and what our current metrics look like. But at this point in time, I would say that's the largest challenge for us, is just not having that granular guidance from the state level that we had kind of become accustomed to for a little while there. I think we will start to see, much like we are accounting for chronic conditions, that as we look to expanding that rapid testing and maybe even taking a look at the symptom set for students and being able to hopefully come away with some of that, if it's a minor single day stomach ache that resolves that evening and they're fine again, and those kind of things. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to look at that symptom list and bring that down some. So that would be I believe my next recommendation for us as we move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Item 9.3 is an informational and discussion item on a way to enhance our ability to be as proactive and responsive to emails that come from the community to the Board of Education. Communication from the community to the board is very important. The board wants to hear from the community and also wants to be responsive to community questions. For this reason, we've developed a process that we feel will help accomplish these goals in a timely and efficient way. We want the community to be assured that when emails are sent to the board, those emails are not only read, but the sender and the rest of the board can see the responses to those questions. So Teresa Communis, our Director of Communications, will walk us through some proposed changes to this process.
Thank you, Dr. Sparlin. So real briefly, this is just the policy, bringing it back up again so it's in front of everyone. There is a policy in place that does direct communications to and from the board, and Dr. Sparlin covered some of this. We want one of the very key takeaways to be that the board in all ways still welcomes that communication from the community that's regarded as very important, and that people can submit those questions, to the school board, superintendent, administration. We just think this really provides a vehicle for people to understand kind of where those questions can be directed. So this is kind of hard to read on small paper here, but these really outline the steps, the 5 steps to this new plan. So we have a group email that the community utilizes. It's a simple way to provide communication to the board. It's the BOE@SD308.org. This email address then copies individually each of the school board members, and superintendent, and recording secretary. At this time, what will be a little bit different is that our president, Mrs. Simulton, will be sending an email back that then outlines kind of the district and board functions and how those may differ, providing links for who to call. On our homepage, we have a great resource of who to call, kind of a roadmap, the type of, the order of who you might need to contact for an issue. So that'll be linked in there, as well as a link to our full staff directory. And then additionally, we'll now have a link to a submit a question. So if you're unsure with those 2 resources, kind of where to direct that question or where that question might belong, this system then provides a way for you to obtain that answer. So someone will use a link to submit the question within the letter that they'll receive from our board president, and they can use that to submit their question. That will be then forwarded and alert the board secretary that this has come in. She will then direct that to the appropriate administrator or individual that can assist with helping to track down that answer and provide that to the community member. As that administrator then replies, that will be copied over to our board secretary. All of that information will be recorded on a Google Sheet, which has viewing privileges for our board. That's an important piece, so you can see the information that people are asking or sharing, what our administrative reply is to those type of questions, as well as an opportunity for us to kind of gauge themes. And if there continues to be questions that we aren't addressing proactively somewhere on our website or in our communication, we want to take those themes to help us to improve and grow and provide those kind of FAQs to our community. So in a brief overview, you'll have their components of that reply. We kind of covered a lot of this and what the role is of the superintendent and administration as compared to the board, and then those links to the various tools that will be there. This is just a screenshot of what the form looks like. So within the letter that's provided by the board president, if someone does have a question and don't know where to send that to, they'll click on the link and this will open up just a easy way for them to submit their information and how we can get back in contact with them. And then this is just a screenshot, not really intended for you to be able to read real clearly at this point, but this gives you kind of a preview to what it'll look like in that Google Sheet that'll be shared with each of you for viewing purposes only. And you'll see here what questions were asked when they came in, who asked them, which administrator those were directed to and when, and what that reply was. So I really think that closes the gap in communication and makes sure that it's visible to everyone here at this table, as well as our administrative team. Is there any questions? Or
I appreciate the fact that, the process empowers, the district. And I think, secondly, because as the board, we are to listen for the concerns, for the aspirations, the desires of our community. And so I love the fact that we will have themes created from all of these emails, because it's really important that we continue to hear from our community, but yet have places by which this information is gathered and sorted in a way that really makes it effective for us to use as board members, because that's our job, to listen. So I appreciate it.
is there somewhere, Teresa, where we can, on any of these touch points of communication, just caveat that you won't hear an individual response from every board member? Because I think I got a lot of frustrating emails that we didn't reply or give an answer, but it is not only our policy, but individually, none of us represent the board. It's the board secretary. So even though I would say thank you for your email, I think they wanted more.
So I believe Mrs. Hamilton's done a great job of capturing that thought in the letter that she intends to utilize in replying. That really does speak to the whole board and really kind of the voice of the board as a single unit, and what the role of the board is as opposed to the role of the superintendent administrators. I know a lot of times people bring individual, student concerns or staff concerns to the board that really would belong more in the administration, at least initially, until they've worked their way through that chain of command. So absolutely, all of that is covered in detail in that initial communication. And as we start to see, again, the themes that come through, we'll use that and proactively take those pieces of education and turn them back into like our parent newsletters and our website FAQs and places where people can learn. Yep.
I think some people had expressed that they wanted to be able to reply. Like, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I don't necessarily want to reply with answers to questions, that I'm not the, authority on. I certainly expect you
I don't
guys
think
to.
that that's ever been the expectation that you would.
Right. I just would like to, send a note of appreciation. So I want to make sure that that's not limited. Acknowledge individually, from myself. So I don't want that limited going forward. I also had, a lot of times it's, something's on the agenda, we support it. They're going to get an auto reply that seems.
Yeah, that was my vibe on this too. To use a phrase the kids these days would say, this feels very impersonal. And when we strive to create connection with individuals who take the time.
Can you talk into your microphone?
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I usually do. I appreciate your noticing that. When we're striving to make connection with individuals in our community, this email reads as incredibly off-putting to me. Because I've taken a step that arguably for many in the community who don't have familiarity with anything related to board leadership, to write a letter to the school board is hard. It's something that you take very seriously. So when you've taken it seriously enough, and very often, and keep in mind that we don't see the kinds of volumes of email that this might be useful for. For example, if you're receiving more than like 20 to 50 emails a day, we don't see that. We see a few. To get those few emails and have, after taking all that time to really craft something that you need the board to know, to get this as an auto reply, one, it's long. It's long. It's a lot of information to take in when you're writing from a place that's not probably based in, it's based also in emotion. Two, it sends the message that we're not interested in connecting with you individually. This is what you ought to be doing. Go talk to other people. And I know that that's not the intent, but that's how it read to me. And I love the idea of the staff directory, the visual roadmap, and the link, but who's to say that that can't be something that we can provide in signature lines so that individual board members, as we can, we have the ability to, as Dominic had said, respond, send a note of appreciation. It doesn't need to be long, but this is, the tone of this is very standoffish in a time when we really, really need to reconnect with the individuals in our community. So for me, I don't care for this at the level of email we're getting. I could see value in this for high amounts of emails, such as we've seen over various topics in the past. So I don't know if it would be something that could be triggered at a certain number of emails to the box per day. But if we're getting 1 or 2 a week, it feels like an unnecessary barrier to connecting.
And I think, you know, when appropriate, it's not always, you know, like I said, sometimes it's just, they're not looking for answers.
Right.
You know.
And I think I want to make sure I clarify based on something that Mrs. Doyle said. It's not an auto reply. So this is just a tool that we've built that your board president can utilize. I think the intent, correct me if I'm wrong, is that she would copy paste and drop that in as a reply. This is not in any way being set up as an auto reply.
Okay.
In addition to whatever comments I want to make to that person.
So I could totally see you replying to that as Latanya, or as this is what you'd like to have standard. Was this brought, let me just get some background because I'm coming into this with only the email saying that this is what would be happening, and then the withdrawal that we'll talk about it instead. Was this a suggestion of our administration? Was this a suggestion by board members? Tell me what the context of why we're talking about this now.
Yeah. So when I became the president, I realized that we needed to do a few things, and I started talking to the board about it. And Teresa also commented that this was something that she had been interested in doing for some time, right? And so the collaboration was that we would work toward making it something that was a part of what she thought would be appropriate and what we as the board could think to be appropriate, and then to bring it to you all for discussion.
That's a little different than how I first became aware of it. So I'm glad that you were having conversations with some board members about this. I'm glad that you were able to get some buy-in from administrators and work on this. I don't think that the concept of having consistency in reply is my concern, but I've expressed those already, so I'm content.
Well,
I think, yeah, as long as this is from you and it's a selective response when appropriate,
No, it
and
will
then we're all.
You're not sending
able-
this,
As an auto reply, no.
okay.
Yeah, when appropriate.
If you would like to send it, I don't have a problem. If you want to send it, I'm not going to send something like that
Right,
to
but I know,
community.
Teresa, you had talked about there was a little verbiage that you had available that you could recommend as something that they could send as well if they wanted to.
Yeah, so kind of sort of bringing some of the components of the policy into plain language, because I do believe that what you said, Lori, about people not understanding kind of the board leadership and communication pattern and all of that, and how we can't just hit reply all when a message comes in and engage in dialogue as a full board. So some language that really kind of educates the community member, and that I love the idea. I hadn't thought about that prior, the idea of the signature line. So maybe there's some statements there that just let people know, you know, an individual can't speak on behalf of the board, that the board as a whole can't communicate via email due to some restrictions in regards to the Open Meeting Act, and some things that really just kind of explain the process and why. Because I do think when community members email into that box, knowing it goes to all 7 of you, in the absence of 7 replies back, they might wonder, well, how come that person or that person or that person didn't? So a little bit of education on how and why we're restricted within certain vehicles of communication, but I also love the idea of having the link to the ask a question in your signatures. I think that would be greatly helpful, because even if you're just writing back to say thank you for taking the time to write in, I did read this and I appreciate it, having that link there in case they had an additional question and don't know where to route it. So I'm happy to put that together and provide that to all of you so that you can take those components and put them in if that's helpful.
And I think there's also that idea of chain of command and how to understand where to go when you have a question, and to make sure that, like, we can't answer questions that have to do with,
And we don't.
yeah, and so
Right.
but providing those links so that people know where to go to, because it's not always easy to find on the website, but making sure when you respond, you know, have you spoken with your school principal? Here's a directory to get the number.
So when we talk about giving instruction, tone is of significant importance. You're making an assumption when you've sent this, that you understand why they're reaching out, right? Because if you're assuming that they will need all of this information, perhaps they know it. Perhaps that's not the intent. This kind of creates kind of that, again, I'll say the word barrier, which isn't chain of command, because I would look at it more as if this is another venue in which people can reach their board members. For example, if you were out at a school event and someone said, hey, can I talk to you about XYZ, or you made an appointment to meet with somebody and you talked with them about it, and they're very clearly sharing a student concern, you wouldn't read this as the only thing you said to them. And that's, I think, does that make sense? That you would have a more personal connection, and this impersonalizes something that I don't think we generally have the bulk to necessitate.
Yeah, I think the, if you make the assumption that this is all they get, then I could understand that, but it's not going to be all that they get. But we need to reinforce for everyone, whether they're
What you would like to reinforce.
Well,
let's be careful how we're talking about it, because we don't, we're deciding if as a board we need it.
Oh, okay. So what I'm thinking is that for what I've seen, oftentimes our community members may need to understand where they can go, where there are opportunities, you know, to have the kind of what was it on slide number 5, where you can ask a question and you can put the information in there. That's not been available.
It has.
To them before. No, has it? I mean, it's not.
It has.
Available. Well, not in this context. Maybe for like COVID.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
But
we have had it.
This is very general in that everyone gets an opportunity for whatever their situation is. And we, you know, we talk, and I understand from the work that I did with the district how different communities communicate differently about how they approach the district. These are opportunities for them to have a place to go. So we're sharing information, we're making it consistent for them.
And I totally understand your perspective and why you think that this would be an appropriate way to go, and I appreciate your opinion. As a board, we have a way to work through these, which is what we're doing. My concern is that we haven't heard from all of our board members. We've heard from some of us.
Yeah, my question, well, there are days that are different from others. And so there are some days where I may get 20 emails from individuals asking me about what to do. Sometimes I even get phone calls in regards to personal items that they don't know who to go to. They don't know where to go. And so having to go to the website or however it is, I think this is very helpful to help people to direct them. However, I agree with you that there's always instead of an auto reply, there's always a way of softening, using the person's name, acknowledging who they are. That's just how I reply to emails. However, there are also times, as we all know, that we may get 100 emails in a couple days, or even a shorter period of time. And it fluctuates. The next day I may only get 1 or 2, but there are several emails that I get on a, I shouldn't say daily basis, but let's just say a weekly basis that everyone may not be copied on. And so I think that it's, and some of them are very general, easy to reply back to.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Sure. Do you mean that you get emailed as Eugene Gatewood at SD308, or that the BOE at SD308 is emailed?
No, not, yeah, this is for BOE. You
right,
are correct.
Because this wouldn't solve that concern that you're having.
You are correct. So, but at the same time, if it's emailed to BOE and that's all of us getting it, then if I think that it's already been said, that's why I wasn't saying anything. It was already said. It's not an auto reply. If it gets to the point where it is an auto reply, then I don't mind this policy as long as it's not a standard auto reply. And I think that we also should use the name of the person to acknowledge and get a better understanding of what they're actually saying. And I think that if the email is sent and if it's not appropriate to say, hey, follow these procedures, then I don't think it should be copied and pasted into the email. And I'm hoping that she will be able to discern when to copy and paste and to not.
I do agree. I mean, Lori, that we need opportunities to connect with our community and our parents. We heard a lot during the last changes with the safety plan and masking that people weren't being responded to. And my question is, I responded to everyone, thank you for, but I guess I'm concerned that they wanted more from each of us, and maybe you gave more. There's only so much we can say, right? So how do we get over that hump of we can't really tell you much more than thank you, right?
So, and that's kind of
It's
my point.
frustrating.
We can't tell, well, it is frustrating, and that's going to always be a continual source of frustration whenever you have a group of individuals governing together, right? So that can't be solved by an email copied and pasted by one person. What I also had found in the times, and remember, the only times we really get the volume of email that you guys have probably experienced as your norm has been COVID. And the scale that
entire time.
Yeah, your entire time on the board. Yeah, that was like another year before that. But generally speaking, this is not the norm. And I know that that's hard to believe, and maybe it won't be in the future, but it has been my experience that, except for COVID, the norm is that you'll get a few to the BOE. Generally speaking, when they go to the BOE, they have a concern that they'd like us to hear.
Means time's up.
Thank you for your opinion. I appreciate you, Ally, every day. Is that your 10 minutes? Were you stopping it? Really? No, I don't want to get distracted. Anyway, so to keep on the task at hand, if I've now made that effort, when I would put an auto reply on, and I did actually have a lot of these same pieces available to me when I sat there to do these things during COVID, because we were getting thousands of emails and it was physically impossible to craft an individual reply. I did put that on with links to things very similar to this. The response was worse. The response for having put an auto reply on was felt more strongly negatively than no reply at all, or a simple short reply. But having put on that reply that was just kind of a generic, because this is kind of a generic, which is the purpose of even copying and pasting. If you copy and paste things in, it's the same response to everyone, which has its good points and bad. But what I found is that in our community, it wasn't well received. It was in fact seen as a detriment to transparency and connection. And I'd caution against it.
So based on the policy that we just said, if it's not an auto reply, if she is replying to all of them based on the context that is being, based on the context of the email that's being sent, and it's personalized based on that response to ensure they have contextual knowledge, what other objections do you now have with the process?
I don't think that it needs to be a requirement for her to send that on behalf of all of us. One, two, I do get concerned continually about sharing information via Google Docs that are shared. We've had conversations in the past on whether, with this board in the past, on whether or not sharing information in such a way is in fact an OMA violation.
Yeah, we can't share Google Docs.
Well, that's what I think this was talking about with this spreadsheet,
So
right?
it was a view only of the form as it came in, and Ursula sent it through.
Right.
So you would have no way
So-
to contribute to the form.
Why would they fill out a form?
So the point of the form is that it would go to Ursula, so that if the person is asking a question about
Totally
student
get it.
discipline or whatnot, then she would forward it. So I'll use a COVID example. If someone came in about COVID, she would forward it to me. I would reply, copy Ursula on it. She records that reply there. And then what that allows us to do is see, these are the kind of questions that people were asking that they didn't know where to direct. And so then we can take some of that information and use that like theme idea to either create an FAQ on the board page or use that information to feed stories in the parent newsletters, so that we're trying to stay ahead of some of the questions that are coming in.
Yeah.
Again, these are
Right.
the questions that aren't your questions to answer. It's the ones that they just didn't know where to go.
No, I understand. So here's the point. We've talked about this with the surveys a little bit ago. And I'm not going to belabor this, because if this is the will of the majority of the board, then that's what it is, and I can disagree, and that's okay. Well, I was still waiting, but in any event, let me just finish by saying we talk about not serving people, not asking people for more. If they've already given us an email, the likelihood of filling out a link very often decreases. So if we're now using this and saying, well, they didn't fill out the link, and
Well, the link was just a way of us.
Can you talk in the microphone, please?
The link was just a way of us getting more information.
yeah.
I think,
Mm-hmm.
like, for me, I would want to respond to every email so that our community knows that, number one, their information is valued, that what they're sending us is important, because we take that information, each of us, when we read these emails, we are taking them into meetings with our superintendent, we're taking them into meetings with each other, we're taking them to places where they can be heard. And that's just the message that I'm trying to send, along with other helpful information that empowers our superintendent and the administration to do their job as well. So if you feel like maybe the language needs to be softened, I can work with Teresa on that, or.
I'd be concerned about a couple things. One, the content of the email, if it's going out on behalf of the members of the board, we should be crafting that together rather than having it sent to us. Two, I'm really significantly concerned about using too much administrative time for our own plans on that, and I know that we've utilized each other's skills for these things in other areas. And I hesitate to add more to an already pretty heavy staff load for our own sake on this. And three, I simply feel like if this is what you would like to send people, that is great. There are some things in here that would be useful for everyone. If we can tag them on, fantastic. But I think that, one, it's not a policy that we're creating, it's a process. Our policies don't state how we will reply, or when we will reply, or that we will reply. This is an effort to go beyond, and the effort shouldn't instead put up an unintentional barrier. So that's the last I'm going to say of it, but I know we haven't heard Ally.
Okay, and then we'll hear from Jen.
I would caution when we say we.
True.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah, it's true. It's a hard
At the end of the
thing.
day, if the goal is to get more information to Teresa, then
Well, the goal is
what's
to
the hard, well, I mean, at the
to
end of
get
the.
information to us, to get themes to us, to get.
But if they're not our
Right, but the
things
goal
to
is to
get,
put them on the website, right, to kind of preemptively kind of answer some of these questions?
I think that's like step 2.
Then, let me ask this, why can't we just add her email to
So
the Board
we-
of Ed?
yeah, to the group thing so that she can
So
reply.
that she
That's
can
a good idea.
actually, so that she can just kind of see the questions.
Without
Because
requiring more.
most of them are administrative related, like we're not gonna be able to fix what they're asking about or concerned about.
Right.
That's
I
not- that's
understand
why-
that, but I think
Nobody's-
our goal
nobody's
is
saying
to
that.
just kind of
Right, that's
preemptively,
why-
if we see themes, then why not just add her onto the, tag her onto the email?
Right, so we do have Ursula, Dr.
That's
Sparlin, I
interesting.
believe you've been on the BOE, were you on, Dr. Sparlin's also included on that. And this is how the process has informally worked. I don't mind having something more formal as an expectation, but this is too much. I like the idea of adding Teresa onto it as well, if that's the goal that you're trying to achieve.
And would you create the signature still with the links that are within here?
Yeah, I'm absolutely able to do that. And we can put the link to the ask a question right on your board page. So before they even email you, if they just want to submit a generic question, we can put it there. It doesn't have to be just within the email, but yeah, I'm happy to provide. And then that way you can pick and choose what you want and feel comfortable using either in the body of your emails or signature.
That sounds great.
Absolutely.
And Dominic should never be afraid to respond to anybody about anything.
Exactly.
Oh, no.
Never.
Yeah, I just want to
Right.
make sure that this wasn't
Oh, yeah, I know.
the intent.
No.
I mean, as
Jen?
long as you say you're speaking for you and not the whole board. you
No,
can pretty much
yeah.
say
Oh,
what you
definitely.
want.
And I think that's a standard practice amongst board members, I think, is to say that when I'm replying on behalf of myself. Even as a board president, I would clarify when I was speaking on behalf of the board, because those circumstances are limited. and sometimes you're applying as yourself as an individual board member. So clarifying is really important.
Jen?
Hi, I have nothing. I just have a lot of thoughts, but we can talk about it. This is just information.
Yeah, this is just information. Okay.
Cool.
Thank you guys for the conversation. All right.
All right, let's see. Item 9.4 is an informational item on an intergovernmental agreement with Valley Education for Employment System. Dr. Kincaid, our Executive Director of High School and Accountability, is here to walk you through this and answer any questions you have on Valleys.
So, good evening. We are currently involved with Valleys through an intergovernmental agreement. Valleys is the Valley Education for Employment System. They're the regional delivery system of CTE programs in the state of Illinois. So their focus is really on strengthening CTE statewide. Illinois School Code requires an IGA. The last time that ours was updated was in the 1990s. So we were provided the IGA that you have now received from Valleys. Every district within Valleys is required to adopt the same IGA. We are currently in our regional organization with 17 other districts, including Fox Valley Career Center, Indian Valley Vocational Center, and the Plano Area Special Ed Cooperative. The focus of the IGA is really approval and oversight of the operating budget, which includes both CTEI and Perkins grant funds. Also talks about assessing and evaluating the requirements of the reauthorization of Perkins 5, really focusing on program compliance. Our Valleys also structures our advisory committees, of which our staff participates in, as well as professional learning. Most recently, we had both students and staff present at the countywide Institute Day. And then Valleys also, on the behalf of the districts within the collaborative, works with post-secondary institutions, mainly Wabanzi, to award articulated credit for the students that achieve A's and B's in approved courses. So really the focus, you should have in your board packet not only the updated IGA, but also a red line copy of the IGA. The new things are focusing on the reauthorization of Perkins 5. So it includes things based on the programs, talks about the programmatic data review that we're required to do for the state of Illinois, also references the local needs assessment, which is required for our Perkins and CTI funding. We have recently completed both the PDR and the LNA, and then also references the program realignments. Any questions?
I just had a conversation with somebody talking about this service being provided in Will County for a specific, like a vet tech kind of pathway. Is this similar to the Will County offerings that offer these different kinds of technical education paths?
Yes, so we offer courses in all of the different career and technical education pathways. Our students, we tend to send students in CNA, and also EMT. They go to Fox Valley Career Center, so our students have the opportunity to attend the Career Center. We try to, right now though, offer most of the pathways within our own schools. So, but yeah.
Anya, had you participated in this? I thought, or in some way, shape, or form. You did the CNA program?
Yes, I did it through Envana Healthcare, and then I got my state certification in, I think, July of 2021.
And were you able to take advantage of that through something you'd learned here? I don't know if you would know necessarily where it came from, that you had the opportunity.
I do know that, I think the school could do like a CNA program, but I personally did it outside of school just because I had more time during the summer.
That makes sense.
But yeah.
Thank you.
But it's an important pathway for kids who maybe may not be headed to college.
It is an employable skill. I'm sure you're in high demand once you graduate at some point.
No, yeah, it's definitely helpful. I'm glad, because I know a lot of people have asked me about it because they also want to do the whole CNA program. They don't have time over the summer or they can't afford it, and there's a lot of other factors. So I think it's really important to have some sort of foundation in schools.
Thank you.
I think you covered the question I had, but just if you can, for the community, explain CTE, CTI, all the acronyms that you used. So
Absolutely. CTE is Career and Technical Education. So we are awarded 2 different grants. One is a state flow through and one is a federal. So CTEI is our state grant money, and then Perkins is our federal. So the state and the nation strongly supports career and technical education, where we provide additional funding for culinary, for woods, for autos, for engineering, for our childhood. It helps run our preschool at both of our schools. So we are able to not only support our students through both professional learning for our teachers and supplies and materials. We just replaced a bunch of the appliances at Oswego High School for the culinary program. We're able to use the funds to update and really have relevant access to technology. We replaced devices in both our graphics program and our engineering pathways. So it really affords us the opportunity to make sure that we have relevant access to industry-based technology. We've been able to award and pay for some of the industry credentials. We currently do OSHA 10 and the ProSafe, so the safe sanitary sanitization certification. So we really try to align our funds to really the student needs to effectively run programs.
very cool.
Do we still have the acronym list on the website for all of these things too?
We can link it in our board emails.
The answer, yes, we do, Lori.
Yeah, I thought so. I know Mrs. Kroner had been pretty adamant also, like you when she'd started, that this is a lot of acronyms.
It is.
I mean, it's in the document that
It
was provided, but you know,
Putting
not
a plug
everybody's
in
looking
for
at
the
that.
acronym list on the website is what I'm doing.
Thank you, Dr. Kincaid.
Thank you.
Item 9.5 is a first read and update on 5 policies. Are there any questions on the 5 policies that have been presented to the board this evening?
I do want to point out that the board, or the committee suggested expenditures in excess of 20,000 instead of 25.
Can you share information on why 20,000 was chosen as opposed to, say, 10?
Oh, we talked all the way down to 5.
I'm sure you did. That's why I would
But we
like
were
some.
like, the Board of Education does not have that much time to go all the way down to 5.
I was still mad about the buses.
Right. So that's why I'm asking.
Did she answer it for you?
No. No one. I get that you probably did. I don't understand. I guess what I'm looking for is clarification on, because we don't have time at 5, definitely, but we've had conversations at so many different levels for so many years that I'm curious how 20 was settled upon. What was the deciding factor at 20?
We thought we'd try 20, and then if we needed to lower it to 15, we would.
That is a reason.
And same with disposition as well, that we'd like to know if we're getting rid of huge assets.
Well, and that's the next thing is, how are we valuing the used assets when we dispose of them? Because if you start to get into what could qualify as 20,000, theoretically, an entire school district's worth of old textbooks might not currently be valued at the market value of 20,000. They might be valued at $10.
But it will just be a memo to the board that says this is what's being disposed of. So it's just like, oh, and then Ally provided a very specific situation that happened that she would have liked to know that was because it affects other decisions.
Definitely,
of
totally
what we're going
agree.
to buy down the road when we
Right.
just got rid of something. So
I'm just questioning, how are we asking them to value the disposed property? Are we doing it at like a depreciated value, or?
That would be Dr.
Like,
Pesky's.
because to me, if I were no longer going to use like my phone is now worth $0. However, what we intend is when I replace this phone, it's going to be $1,000, right? Or whatever it is next time. But to me then, getting rid of this phone is going to cost me $1,000. So I was wondering if, because I think that that was the intent you were getting to is.
Yeah, we didn't get it in policy. We assumed that we could trust the administration to
Understand what we meant.
that we were trying to discourage the.
Totally agree, but if we can settle on how that is, it could be a
I think that would be
potential way to avoid a misstep in miscommunicating. Well, I mean, technically, we valued it at $10 because we couldn't sell it for $10 versus we're gonna have to spend $20,000 to replace
So it would
it.
be more procedure than policy, but would it?
I don't know,
Well, it's
though.
replacement
Not
value.
really. Yeah,
That's a common term.
replacement value, market value, depreciated value. We just
Dr.
need to settle on
Petsky?
one of those names. I
Dr.
don't mind
Petsky,
which.
when we're getting rid of, say, a certain year of Chromebooks, what is the, I mean, those are leased, so that's a terrible example, but what, when you are doing that, what is the
Both and.
disposition value, the depreciation value that we're?
How would you mark it in your books? Would you mark it as the cost to replace or the fair market value of that actual item?
I think it depends on the resource, what we're looking at, because you're right, in some cases, a 5-year-old Chromebook, if you look at what we paid for it 5 years ago, it was worth $300, but now that 5-year-old Chromebook doesn't work, it can't support the operating system, it's useless.
But
So
the
you're right, there is a
replacement cost-
replacement cost, which I would consider a refresh cost. That's kind of the balance that you guys are talking about, is what is that balance between acquiring a resource and then depreciating it, and then it, in its life cycle, getting rid of it.
So I think you need both,
Hold on.
right?
We can take it back to committee.
Yeah, let's talk more about that elsewhere, but yeah, I think I know what, I remember the circumstance you're speaking of. I think I understand, if I remember correctly.
It was about vans.
Yeah,
or
I
Yeah.
think
buses
Yeah,
you need, I
it sure
think you need
was.
both. I
Sure
think in
was.
every situation, we have to do both, no matter what.
We have,
Because
right.
there's some instances where you may not reply, I can't think
No, I
of one where
totally
you may
agree with
not,
you.
but-
What I'm saying is this doesn't say which one
Oh.
they should use as the kind of gatekeeper to where they will put it on the list. What makes it put on the list? Which one of those?
Yeah, I think.
Well, because we're talking about dollars spent, I would say replacement value would be
I would think
the more
so as
pertinent,
well. Yeah, that's
know.
kind of the point.
Got it.
Yeah. I hope
because you're
so.
looking at future expenditures, basically.
We can pull it, take it back to committee. Got it.
But I think it almost needs to have both, because think about it, and I know we can keep going, but if someone.
It's an
is-
asset that's, yeah,
Yeah,
it's an
'cause
asset
if you're
that's been, yeah.
disposing of an
Yeah, it could
asset
have
that has
both.
value,
Yeah.
Right.
then we want to know that as well.
Can you tell who are the people are that like the number?
Yeah.
So you
Sorry.
guys want replacement value
And depreciated
value.
actual value. I think
Yes.
we need both.
And that's on policy.
It is on policy 4:60.
All right, so I'm gonna pull two policies, 4:60 and 4:65.
65.
I'm like, where are my glasses?
0.65.
4.65.
I could write it on a piece of paper.
I'm gonna pull them both.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to pull, sorry.
And sometimes, though,
They're
the
information.
Yeah, it's-
They're just
Oh,
the
information.
disposition is about
Right.
letting the board know
Yep.
that in the future, you might be getting a request for an expenditure. We just told you, whereas right now, we have no idea kind of what's
Right.
going out the door.
Or what happens to say, like, if there is a pile of curriculum that we're getting rid of, to
Yes.
take some new curriculum in, what happens to that?
Yes,
And how are we making sure that we're aware of what has happened?
yeah.
Yeah, that's a good thing to know.
Because there's resale on the black market that we don't want that.
They, I'm pretty sure they don't.
Of course
I
not.
just, I feel like there might be a law that avoids that,
I
but
feel like sometimes, but it is.
I would hate to see everything go up in a bonfire in the parking lot also.
Right. The other policies that are for first read were highlighted changes from the Teaching and Learning Committee I spoke about earlier, that we just would like accredited in front of tech program and distance learning courses, so that they're not just, the Jen Johnson online learning program from Oswego. It's that there's some accreditation around it, and really giving the administrators that power to see that and make sure that they're appropriate. And then I think there was, under exemption, or 7.260, there was a legal update on that policy. Reentering students. And 8.65 is new, and that talks about a document that will be with parents.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to have seen that come in, to be honest with you. I know that that's an area where parents continue to feel a little confused, and say, well, I didn't think I heard that in the meeting, and it's not in the notes. So having the ability to hear what was said during a time when there's a lot of people in the room, I really appreciate that that's being added.
For those of us that are deaf and hard of hearing, it's nice to be able to go and listen to it afterwards. But all parties need to know that they're being recorded.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, anything else? We're going to move on to 10.1, action item, approval of bills for payment. Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to authorize the payment of bills in the amount of $4,671,474.07 as presented.
Second.
Mr. Saron,
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Simulton.
Aye. Motion passes 6-0. Action item 10.2, approval of bus trust lease agreement. Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to approve the bus trust lease agreement with Midwest Transit Equipment, Inc. and Santander Leasing LLC as presented.
Second.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
Aye.
Mr. Saron,
Aye.
Mrs. Simulton,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0. Action item 10.3, approval of boilers and chillers project. Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to approve the recommendation to accept the base bid and alternates number 1 and number 2 from Helm Mechanical in the amount of $2,095,000.
Second.
Mrs. Simulton,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Saron,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0. Action item 10.4, approval of board policies. Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to approve the following board policies. Section 2, School Board, 2:120, 2:220. Section 3, General School Administration, 3:40. Section 4, Operational Services, 4:175. Section 5, General Personnel, 5:30, 5:125, 5:200. Section 6, Instruction, 6:60, 6:135, 6:180. And Section 7, Students, 7:240, 7:250, 7:260, 7:290, 7:310, and 7:315.
Second. Hey, but can you please tell Rob thank you for staying till 9:30?
I saw the nod. Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Saron,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle,
With a nod to the continued use of MySpace as a social media app. Aye.
Mrs. Simulton.
Aye. Motion passes 6-0. Action item
Make it a
10.5,
comeback.
student disciplinary case 2021-22-2. Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to expel student 2022-2 through the 2022-23 school year pursuant to the board's written findings and decision as discussed in closed session.
Second.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Saron,
Aye.
Mrs. Simulton,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0. Action item 10.6, student disciplinary case 2021-22-3. Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to transfer student 2022-3 to an alternative regional safe school selected by the administration pursuant to Article 13A of the School Code for the remainder of the 21-22 school year in accordance with the board's written findings and decision discussed in closed session.
Second.
Mrs. Simulton,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
Aye.
Mr. Saron,
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0. Action item 10.7, student disciplinary case 2021-22-4. Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to uphold the one-day out-of-school suspension of student 2022-4.
Second.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
Aye.
Mr. Saron,
Aye.
Mrs. Simulton,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0. Action item 10.8, resolution authorizing dismissal and non-reemployment of first-year probationary teachers. Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to approve the resolution authorizing dismissal and non-reemployment of first-year probationary teachers as presented.
Second.
Mrs. Swanson,
Aye.
Mrs. Simulton,
Aye.
Mr. Saron,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0. Action item 10.9, resolution authorizing dismissal and non-reemployment of second-year probationary teachers. Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to approve the resolution authorizing dismissal and non-reemployment of second-year probationary teachers as presented.
Second.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson,
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
Aye.
Mrs. Simulton,
Aye.
Mr. Saron.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0. Action item 10.10, resolution authorizing dismissal and non-reemployment of probationary part-time teachers and teachers hired under a temporary contract. Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to approve the resolution authorizing dismissal and non-reemployment of probationary part-time teachers and teachers hired under a temporary contract.
Second.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Simulton,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mr. Saron,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0. Action item 10.11, approval of district administrator contract. Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to approve the district administrator contract as presented.
Second.
Mrs. Simulton,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
No.
Mr. Saron,
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-1. Action item 10.12, approval of personnel report. Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to approve the personnel report as presented.
Second.
Mr. Saron,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
No.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Simulton.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. And, 5-1, sorry, 5-1, that's what I meant. 11.1, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Closed session.
Oh, yes, one second. May I have a motion to return to closed session?
I make a motion to enter closed session under statute 5 ILCS 120/2C3, the selection of a person to fill a public office as defined in the Open Meetings Act, including a vacancy in a public office when the public body is given power to appoint under law or ordinance or the discipline, performance, or removal of the occupant of a public office when the public body is given power to remove the occupant under law or ordinance.
Second.
Mrs. Simulton,
Aye.
Mrs. Swanson,
Aye.
Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Saron,
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood.
Aye.